The city lights blurred past the car window as rain streaked the glass like tears. My husband, Silas, drummed his fingers on the steering wheel, the rhythmic tapping a sharp counterpoint to the classical symphony playing softly through the speakers. It was a familiar sound, the soundtrack of our shared silence. "Remember, tonight is about perception," he said, not looking at me. His voice was a low monotone, devoid of the warmth he reserved for business associates and important strangers. "The new CEO will be there. Everything hinges on this. Just stay in the background. That dress is adequate, I suppose, but don't draw attention to yourself." I smoothed the fabric of my navy blue skirt, the soft wool now feeling cheap and thin under his critical gaze. Adequate, the word hung in the air, a tiny verdict on 25 years of marriage. I'd found the dress at a consignment shop for $47. A small victory in a life of carefully managed budgets. The $200 Silas allotted me each month had to cover everything: clothes, toiletries, the small, obligatory gifts for the wives of men he needed to impress. I had become an expert at making little look like enough. "I understand," I murmured, the words automatic. "Don't embarrass me." The unspoken coda to every instruction, the foundational principle of our life together. My voice, once filled with opinions and laughter, had been whittled down to this quiet agreement. The Grand Regency Hotel was a monument to gilded excess. Crystal chandeliers dripped light onto marble floors, polished to a mirror shine. The air was thick with the scent of gardenias and expensive perfume, a cloying sweetness that made my throat tighten. Everywhere I looked, women glided in silks and satins that probably cost more than our monthly mortgage, their laughter as sharp and bright as their jewels. Silas deposited me near a potted fern that offered the illusion of privacy. "Wait here. I need to work the room. Don't wander off." He adjusted his cufflinks, symbols of a legacy he was desperate to uphold, and melted into the crowd, his shoulders set with a determined rigidity that betrayed his anxiety. I knew his shipping logistics company was foundering. I'd overheard the hushed, frantic phone calls late at night, the whispers about creditors and collapsing contracts. This gala was his life raft, and he was drowning. I stood my ground, a still point in the swirling sea of calculated merriment, nursing a glass of sparkling water. I watched him across the room, his gestures becoming increasingly animated as he talked at a circle of stone-faced men in Savile Row suits. His smile was too wide, his laugh too loud. The desperation was a visible aura around him, pushing people away even as he tried to pull them closer. Then, a shift, a subtle change in the room's atmosphere, like the drop in pressure before a storm. Conversations dimmed, heads turned. A man had entered the ballroom. He was tall, with an easy confidence that had nothing to do with posture and everything to do with presence. His dark hair was silvered at the temples, and he wore a simple, exquisitely cut tuxedo. Even from a distance, there was a faint, haunting familiarity in the way he moved, an echo from a lifetime ago that made my heart give a single, painful thud. "That's him," a woman nearby whispered to her companion, her voice tinged with awe. "Lucien Thorne. He bought out the entire holding company last month. Word is, he's ruthless." Lucien, the name was a key turning in a lock long rusted shut. It couldn't be. The mathematics of coincidence made it impossible. Yet, as he turned, his profile caught in the light, time itself seemed to buckle. The strong line of his jaw, the way he held his head slightly to the left when surveying a room, it was him, my Lucien, the boy I had loved with the terrifying, all-consuming fire of first youth, the man whose child I had carried for a fleeting, secret 12 weeks before my world shattered. A wave of nausea washed over me. I shrank back into the fern's shadow, my pulse a frantic bird against my ribs. What cruel twist of fate had made him the architect of Silas's last hope? Across the room, Silas spotted his quarry. I watched, paralyzed, as my husband carved a path through the crowd, his hand already extended in premature greeting. He reached Lucien, his mouth moving in what was surely a rehearsed pitch. Lucien accepted the handshake, his expression politely neutral, but his eyes, those dark, intense eyes I remembered so well, were restless, scanning the faces around him, and then they stopped. On me. The world dissolved into a silent slow-motion reel. Lucien Thorne's face, so carefully composed, went utterly still. The color drained from his skin, his lips parted in shock, and for a breathtaking second, the powerful CEO vanished, replaced by the ghost of a 25-year-old man. Seeing his heart walk back into the room, he moved. He walked away from Silas in mid-sentence, cutting through the crowd with a single-minded focus that left a wake of bewildered whispers. Silas's hand hung in the empty air for a moment before he turned, confusion curdling into dawning horror as he followed Lucien's relentless path, straight to me. He stopped before me, so close I could see the faint lines at the corners of his eyes, the silver threads in his beard. He smelled of sandalwood and rain, nothing like the citrus cologne he'd worn in college. Alara, he breathed, and the sound of my name on his lips, after 30 years, was a balm and a wound all at once. A single, perfect tear traced a path down his cheek, catching the chandelier light. Before I could speak, before I could breathe, he reached out and took both my hands in his. His palms were warm, his grip firm yet gentle, and his fingers were bare no wedding band. "I've spent 30 years looking for you," he said, his voice low and thick with an emotion that shook me to my core. It carried in the sudden, profound hush that had fallen over our corner of the ballroom. "I never stopped loving you." The sound of shattering crystal was shockingly loud. Silas's champagne flute lay in glittering fragments at his feet, the pale gold liquid seeping into the marble like a stain. The spell was broken, replaced by a buzzing cacophony of stunned murmurs. "This is an outrage." Silas's voice cut through the air, sharp with humiliation and fury. He inserted himself between Lucien and me, his face flushed. "Alara, what is the meaning of this? Who is this man?" I opened my mouth, but no sound emerged. How could I possibly explain a lifetime of buried history in this gilded cage, surrounded by spectators? Lucien's gaze never wavered from my face. "Might we speak privately?" he asked, his tone leaving no room for argument. "Privately? She is my wife. Anything you have to say, you can say in front of me," Silas buttered, clinging to a claim that suddenly felt paper-thin. "No," Lucien said, the words simple and absolute. "I cannot." The weight of his look held decades of unanswered questions. I saw the hurt there, a wound that had never healed, and beneath it, the astonishing, resilient truth of his declaration. I also saw Silas's panic, the crumbling of his carefully constructed evening. "Lucien," I finally managed, my voice a thread of sound. "Not here, please." He nodded, a world of understanding in the gesture. He reached into his jacket and withdrew a stark white business card, its edges crisp. "Call me," he said, pressing it into my hand. Our fingers brushed, and a current, ancient and powerful, jolted through me. "We need to talk." "We are leaving," Silas announced, his voice booming with false authority. His hand closed around my upper arm, his grip vice. "Now." Lucien's eyes darkened dangerously at the sight of Silas's possession, but I gave a minute shake of my head. He stepped back, his jaw clenched, a storm held in check by the barest thread. "I will wait for your call," he said. The promise, quiet but iron-clad. Silas dragged me through the ballroom, a spectacle of his own making. I clutched Lucien's card, its corners biting into my palm, a tiny anchor in the maelstrom. The ride home was a tunnel of his rage, accusations, threats, demands for explanations I couldn't give. I heard none of it. My mind was tumbling through time, back to a sun-drenched campus in Boulder, to a boy with dark eyes who believed love was the most powerful force in the universe. We met in the university library during our junior year, two strangers surrounded by the dust of old books and the pressure of impending finals. I was an English major on a scholarship, piecing my education together with part-time jobs. He was in the business school, sharp and ambitious, yet possessed of a quiet kindness that disarmed me. "You look like you've been declared war on by the 19th century, he'd said, nodding at the stack of Victorian novels teetering beside me. His smile was hesitant, genuine. "There's a diner off campus that serves pie at any hour. Rescue mission." I'd been prepared to dismiss him, another privileged boy slumming it, but his eyes held no mockery, only curiosity. "I can't afford diner pie," I said honestly. "I didn't ask if you could afford it," he replied. "I asked if you needed it." That was Lucien. He saw through the walls I'd built, not to dismantle them, but to meet me on the other side. We became inseparable. He showed me his world of tailored suits and formal dinners, but he preferred mine. Late-night study sessions, shared takeaways, long walks, talking about everything and nothing. He listened, truly listened, in a way that made me feel like the most fascinating person alive. He proposed on a blanket by the reservoir, the Rockies painting a purple silhouette against a peach-colored sky. He produced his grandmother's ring, an Art Deco sapphire surrounded by diamonds. "Marry me, Alara," he'd said, his voice trembling with more than just the cool mountain air. build a life with me, any kind of life you want. I said yes, my heart so full I thought it would burst. We were 22, armed with nothing but love and degrees we hadn't yet earned, and it felt like more than enough. But his parents, Alistair and Beatrice Thorne, were pillars of old Denver society. My scholarship student background, my father's teaching career, my mother's work as a librarian, it was all a charming novelty to Lucian. But to them, it was an existential threat to their lineage. When they learned of our engagement, their response was not anger, but a cold, surgical dismantling. Alistair Thorne summoned me to his office. It wasn't a discussion, it was a demonstration of power. He laid out, in precise, unemotional detail, how he would have my scholarship revoked. He outlined how every door Lucian tried to open independently would be sealed shut through his vast network of influence. He believes he can choose you over his birthright, Alistair said, steepling his fingers. He is wrong, and you will both be left with nothing. Or, he continued, his voice softening into something more terrible than the threat, you can be sensible. Walk away. Let him fulfill his destiny. I will ensure you graduate with honors and have excellent letters of recommendation. You can have your future, or you can have him, and together you can have a very pleasant kind of poverty. The choice, my dear, is yours. I was already pregnant. I'd known for a week. The secret, a bright, terrifying flame in my chest. I had planned to tell Lucian that weekend. Now, his father's words painted a horrific future. Lucian, broken and resentful, struggling to provide for a wife and child in a world rigged against him. Our love, stretched thin by disappointment. I made the choice. I broke both our hearts in a coffee shop, handing back the sapphire ring with a speech about different worlds and unrealistic dreams. I watched the light in his eyes die, and I let him believe the fault was mine, that my love had been too small. 3 weeks later, I lost the baby. The loneliness that followed was a physical void. When Silas Mercer, a friend of my father's, a man 15 years my senior whose shipping business seemed the embodiment of stability, proposed 6 months later, I said yes. I didn't love him. I was exhausted from grief. I thought safety could be a kind of happiness. I was wrong. Silas's control was subtle at first, then absolute. My world shrank to the dimensions of his approval. I became a well-dressed ghost in my own life. But I never forgot Lucian. I followed his career from the shadows of the business section, a secret witness to his rise. He'd built his empire from the ground up, publicly severing ties with his family's company. He'd married, I read, and later divorced. And now, through some impossible alchemy, he was here, that night. After Silas finally exhausted his anger and locked himself in his study, I retrieved a small velvet box from the back of my closet. Inside, nestled against the worn fabric, was Lucian's grandmother's sapphire ring. I had never returned it. It was my secret totem, proof that what we had was real. I held his business card in one hand, the ring in the other. One was a door to a future, the other a key to the past. For the first time in 25 years, I felt a dangerous, thrilling possibility. It took 3 days to find the courage. When Silas left for a meeting, the house empty save for the echo of his rules. I called the number on the card. Thorne Innovations. A efficient voice answered. This is Elara Mercer. Mr. Thorne asked me to call. A brief pause. Of course, Mrs. Mercer. 1 moment, please. And then his voice, a deep, familiar warmth flooding through the line. Elara, thank you. We met at a small, independent bookstore with a cafe in the back, a place far from Silas's usual haunts. Sunlight streamed through the windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. He looked more himself here, out of the corporate armor. You look tired, he said gently, his eyes missing nothing. I am, I admitted. And then, over bitter coffee, I told him everything. His father's ultimatum, the pregnancy I'd hidden, the miscarriage, the crushing loneliness that led me to Silas, the 30-year prison of a marriage built on silence and submission. He listened, his face growing paler, his hands clenching around his mug. When I finished, the silence between us was heavy with the weight of stolen time. My father, he finally said, the words laced with a quiet, devastating fury. And you are carrying our child. He ran a hand through his hair, the gesture achingly familiar. All these years, I thought I hadn't fought hard enough. I thought you'd simply stopped loving me. I thought I was protecting you, I whispered. You were protecting us from a monster, he corrected, his voice softening. He reached across the small table, his hand covering mine. Elara, I divorced Cora 3 years ago. It was a marriage of convenience, empty from the start. I never stopped looking for you. I hired people, followed leads that went cold, until last month, I'd finally traced you here. I was planning. I didn't know how to approach you. And then you were just there. What happens now? The question hung between us, fragile as glass. That is entirely up to you, he said, his thumb stroking my knuckles. I know you're married. I know this is immense. But this, he gestured between us, never ended for me. I don't believe it ended for you either. He was right. The connection was a live wire, humming with 30 years of pent-up energy. Silas will never let me go, I said, not without a fight. He sees me as a part of his facade, and now, with his business. Then don't ask for permission, Lucian said, his gaze steady. Leave him. Come work for me. I'm creating a literary outreach foundation, partnering with city schools. Your degree, your passion, it's perfect. It would give you independence, a life of your own. The offer was a lifeline. It was also a declaration of war. I took his personal card, our fingers brushing again, that electric current undiminished by time. I need to think, he said, but don't disappear. I can't lose you into the silence again. I didn't disappear, but Silas, with the predatory instinct of a cornered animal, sensed the shift. He confronted me, his jealousy curdling into something uglier when he saw I wouldn't be cowed. In a shocking moment of spite, he revealed his own secret. He had known of Lucien's searches for me over the years. He had paid off investigators, buried leads, actively worked to keep us apart. I protected what was mine, he sneered. That was the moment the last vestige of whatever bond our marriage had held snapped. His confession wasn't protection. It was a 30-year theft. I looked at this man, this stranger I had lived with, and felt only a cold, clear certainty. I'm leaving, I said. His threats were financial, brutal. He promised to drag me through the courts, to leave me destitute. But the fear that once would have paralyzed me now felt distant. I packed a single suitcase while he raged downstairs. I called Lucian from a hotel. He was there within 20 minutes. When he saw the bruises Silas had left on my arm, a storm gathered in his eyes, but his touch was gentle. He listened as I told him of Silas's confession. The pain on his face was profound. 30 years, he breathed. He stole 30 years from us. He didn't press. He simply said, the job is yours. The foundation needs a director, and there's an apartment in my building that's vacant. It's yours, for as long as you want it. No strings. Just be free. Alara, I took the job. The work was meaningful. Building literacy programs for children in underserved neighborhoods. For the first time in my adult life, I was valued for my mind, my ideas, my passion. The salary was more than symbolic. It was emancipation. I rented the apartment, a light-filled space with my own books on the shelves, my own choices on the walls. Silas fought back with a pathetic lawsuit, but his own house of cards was collapsing. Lucian's lawyers, digging into Silas's affairs in preparation for my divorce, uncovered something darker: financial fraud, misappropriated funds. The federal investigation that followed swept away Silas's threats, his company, his entire fabricated world. His downfall was swift and complete, a justice that felt less like vengeance and more like the natural consequence of a life built on lies. 8 months later, I stood before a floor-length mirror, not in a bridal boutique, but in the sunny bedroom of my own apartment. The dress was ivory silk, simple and elegant. It was not a costume for a role. It was a declaration. Margaret Lucian's chief of staff, who had become a dear friend, fastened a necklace around my throat. He's been waiting his whole life for this day, she said, her eyes misty. The ceremony was in the private garden of a historic museum. Our guests were for true friends, colleagues who had become family. As I walked toward him, the late afternoon sun gilding the autumn leaves, I saw only Lucien, the boy I'd loved, the man who'd waited, his eyes shining with a joy so profound it stole my breath. We wrote our own vows. His spoke of a love that had been a constant star, guiding him through 30 years of empty success. Mine spoke of learning that love was not something you settled for, but something you choose, bravely, every day. When it was time, he didn't produce a new ring. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, familiar velvet box. He opened it, and the sapphire ring caught the light, its blue fire undimmed by time or tragedy. It's always been yours, he said softly, slipping it onto my finger. It fit as if the decades in between had been nothing but a pause. Later, under a canopy of stars and string lights, he held me as we danced. Any regrets? He murmured into my hair. I leaned back, looking up at the man who was my past, my present, and my future, all woven together into a second chance I'd never dared to dream of, only that we had to wait so long to get it right. He smiled, that same, soul-deep smile from the library, from the reservoir, from a lifetime ago. "We got it right now," he said. "That's all that matters." And as the music swelled around us, filled with the laughter of our loved ones and the promise of the life ahead, I knew with absolute certainty that he was right. Some loves are not stories with endings. They are constants, like mountains against the sky. They endure. And if you are very, very lucky, they find their way home.